In discussing Mike Milbury, the GM portion has to be its own video. So his work as an analyst will have to be a third, and I'll do it another day. We're going to talk about his GM career right now, and it's all Islanders. And I've got both logos on the board, the good one and the ugly one. Now, I understand there's a lot of people who have an affection for the Islanders fisherman logo, and to them I say, you must not have been old enough to have seen it on the ice. Now, it is worthy of note that the fisherman logo came in while Milbury was GM, but the team was kind of already awful at that point. So when he takes over as general manager, he sets about trying to fix things. Now, I haven't included all of the egregious deals. I understand there are a lot of egregious deals. I started looking through and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go with noteworthy and a couple of egregious ones, because if I listed every trade that we could argue that he lost, I'm going to need about 3 boards. And the video is going to be so excessively long, nobody's going to watch it. So, October 3rd, 1995, there's a 3-way deal. Wendell Clark becomes an Islander. Claude Lemieux becomes a member of the Avs, and Steve Thomas becomes a member of the New Jersey Devils. It was noteworthy because all 3 of them were very similar players at different points in their careers. But Claude Lemieux, a winner. And he went to the Avalanche, and they win a Stanley Cup the following spring. And while we talk a lot about Patrick Roy and his part of it, Claude Lemieux definitely a part as well. January 23rd of 1996, he makes a deal where he acquires Ken Belanger, Brian Berard, Martin Straka. So Berard, not a fan of the whole Ottawa thing. Wade Redden and Damian Rhodes go the other way. Now, what's interesting, and the reason I've got this on the board is this. Berard does win Rookie of the Year. Great. But long-term, they'd lose this deal as well. Wade Redden has a very long career. Now, Berard would suffer injuries and whatnot, but when you look at their careers, it's still a trade that, for me, they kind of lost. Now, in this deal as well, Don Beaupre and Kirk Muller end up being members of the Leafs. So Kirk Muller, who had been a member of the New York Islanders, ends up being moved out. It's a 3-way trade because he loved 3-way deals. Clearly, his first year as GM. And it's a bewildering one for me from the Leafs' perspective as well when picking up Don Beaupre. I still found that weird at the time. Still kind of find it weird. But yeah, it was a good deal for Ottawa. I don't say that these days, do I? But it is one of those ones that when you look at it, it looks pretty even, but Wade Redden had a pretty solid career as an Ottawa Senator. March 13th of 1996, Sean Haggerty, Darby Hendrickson, Kenny Johnson, and a number 1 draft pick that would become Roberto Luongo are moved to the New York Islanders. What does he give up? Wendell Clark goes back to Toronto, Matthew Schneider, and DJ Smith. This is a win. Yeah, this is a win. He gets a number 1 draft pick from Toronto that becomes Roberto Luongo, capitalizing on the name of Wendell Clark and the fact that he is a fan favorite there, much like Trevor Linden is for Vancouver fans, and we'll get to Linden on this board. But, he wins this deal. I understand that you look at Hendrickson and Haggerty, but Johnson became a pretty decent defenseman for the Islanders. And Luongo, for all 3 guys, I think is a win, to be honest. But the Toronto Maple Leafs at the time trying to build themselves back up. This is still during the Doug Gilmour era, so they're still trying to get back to where they were in 93 and 94. November 17th, 1996. A deal that at the time we may not have paid a lot of attention to. Brian Smolinski is acquired by the Islanders looking for scoring. They trade out Andreas Johansson and Darius Kasparaitis. Kasparaitis, one of the most reviled players in the league for his physicality, also beloved by fans of teams that he played for. So this is a deal that absolutely he loses here. Kasparaitis, solid player, and Smolinski. I liked Brian Smolinski, but he's a guy that if you're looking for that skill set, you can find a number of guys who could play like Smolinski. August 25th, 1997. I bring this one up because everywhere I look, I see Milbury, worst GM ever. Look at these trades. Look how stupid he is. He grabs Marius Tchaikovsky from the Edmonton Oilers for Dan Lacouture, who he had drafted in 1996 in the second round. Lacouture, not an NHLer. Tchaikovsky had a 35-goal season with the New York Islanders. So he wins that deal. He wins that going away. February 8th, 1998, he doesn't win this one. Trevor Linden acquired from the Canucks. Now, as a huge Canuck fan, I was upset when Linden got traded. But I could not deny that what they got back was pretty solid. They get Todd Bertuzzi, Brian McCabe, and a third-round draft pick that would be used to draft Jarkko Ruutu. Brian McCabe would be used in a package at the 99 draft to get back the Sedin twins. So not bad. Not bad. We get Bertuzzi, and indirectly helps us get the Sedins as well. Thanks, Mike. And again, this is that short-sighted kind of thing, right? McCabe's young, Bertuzzi's young, Linden an established player. He would trade the young guys to bring in the established guys. Now, May 29th of 1999, he then trades Trevor Linden. Okay, he lost 2 trades involving Trevor Linden for a number 1 trick that became Branislav Metse. Yeah. And we'll get into his draft history because his draft history is interesting as well. But he lost a trade to get Trevor Linden, and then he lost the trade where he traded away Trevor Linden. This is why when people talk about Peter Chiarelli and Mike Milbury, you're right. No matter what side of the fence you're on about who did a worse job, Chiarelli in Edmonton or Milbury in New York, you're right. June 19th of 1999, they acquire Matthew Barron, not to be confused with Marty Barron, Josh Green, Olli Jokinen, and a number 1 pick that became Taylor Pyatt for Ziggy Palffy, Marcel Cousineau, Brian Smolinski, so Smolinski that they had acquired in 96, 99, he's out, and a 1999 4th-round draft pick who never plays a game in the NHL. Now, this is a trade that you can look at and say, that's all he got for Ziggy Palffy. Ownership didn't want to pay for Palffy's contract. The New York Islanders had a very, very, very low salary. So let's take a look here. I'm using the 97-98 Hockey News yearbook just to give kind of a picture of where things were at. And it says, prospects looking up, but disaster still looms. And there's that Islanders fisherman jersey that we all hated. It lasted a year. They went back to the original logo because it was so widely beloved. Assuming the New York Islanders' muddled ownership situation does not explode in his face, GM Mike Milbury is hoping the team reaches 500 and makes the playoffs in his 3rd year of his regime. Absolutely, Milbury said. We have a lot of young players who are a year older, more mature, hopefully won't crack under pressure. They were coming off of a record of 29, 41, and 12, so 22nd overall, 12th in the East. And Milbury weeded out 36 out of 49 players who appeared for the club in the 95-96 season. It didn't take very long to weed out pretty much everybody. And that was when they went 22, 50, and 10. And he has assembled one of the NHL's best young defense corps. So there's Brian Berard, who'd been named the Calder Trophy winner that year. The Islanders were 29, 41, and 12 and attracted 10% more fans to Nassau Coliseum. Their average attendance was 12,495. So for Islander fans who talk about, oh, we won't have a problem drawing in Nassau, you did. And we can discuss why, but the Islanders' attendance issues go back decades. The only way it would seem Milbury's rebuilding program could be derailed is if John O. Pickett is unable to resell the club, which he thought he'd done February 24th, when the NHL Board of Governors approved Dallas businessman John Spano as the new owner. That $165 million transaction was negated by the NHL July 10th after an investigation revealed Spano failed to make a $16.8 million payment April 7th. Spano was barred in June from having contact with the team. Milbury and special counsel Bob Skian ran its day-to-day operations over the summer. Milbury was operating with a projected payroll in 1997-98, which Pickett was said was between $20 and $25 million. But Pickett has been an absentee owner, and fans were concerned it cannot resell the club. He might force Milbury to conduct a fire sale. The Islanders finished last season with an NHL low $14 million payroll. Pickett pledged to keep the team on Long Island as a condition of any sale. Former Madison Square Garden chief Bob Tchaikovsky and Mets co-owners Nelson Doubleday and Fred Wilpon were said to be interested in a joint venture to purchase the team. Milbury minimized the impact of the squabble on him, but said, eventually, somebody's going to have to show the money and show it to me. So that's sort of as a refresher on where things were at with the New York Islanders in the late 90s. So we fast forward to Ziggy Palffy. He makes too much money. We got to get rid of him. And that's why. They weren't drawing. They weren't making money. They were losing money. Now, we fast forward to when it really gets thrown off the rails. June 24th, 2000. And it seems like in June, blow her up. Just go ahead and just make a stupid trade because it's June and it's time. Oleg Kvasha and Mark Parrish become members of the New York Islanders in exchange for Roberto Luongo and Olli Jokinen. The thinking process at the time, flawed at best. Roberto Luongo's a good young goaltender. We know he's going to be a good goaltender, but we just drafted this other goaltender, and we think he's going to be a superstar. We don't need two young superstar goalies. We need goals. Olli Jokinen hasn't panned out since we got him a year ago from the LA Kings. So since this young kid hasn't panned out in a year, we're going to trade him to Florida for Mark Parrish, who's established himself as a 20-25 goal guy, and Oleg Kvasha, kind of a project, but he's a big guy, so we'll be able to work with that. This worked out fantastically for Florida, of course, and it did not work out so well for the New York Islanders, and that is an understatement. He trades Luongo. We can argue over whether or not he's a Hall of Famer after he retires. I say he is. I know there's a lot of people who say he isn't. But this move, to me, is what caused him to eventually get fired. But it took entirely too long for that to happen when you consider June 23rd of 2001. What is it with June, Mike? What is it with June? He acquires Alexei Yashin. Alexei Yashin, who basically told the Ottawa Senators while under contract, nah, I've decided that contract I signed, I'm not going to honor it. You guys have to renegotiate it and repay me based on what I now think I'm worth. Mike Milbury, that should have been a red flag. He should have been like, no, I'm not gonna grab Yashin. Not only does he acquire Yashin, he gives him a 10-year, $87.5 million contract to come to New York and play for the Islanders. So the same guy that I talked about in the player video, part of the NHLPA, said, if a team offers more money, I should be able to go there. Clearly still has that mentality with Yashin. Yashin's held out for more money. He's probably right. He's worth more. I'm going to give him his money, and then we're set. What I'm giving up is Bill McCalt. McCalt was a player they had acquired from Vancouver in a Felix Potvin trade, which isn't up here. You can argue they lost the trade where they traded out Potvin. You could argue that he lost the trade where he got Potvin. But, you know, these are not major earth-moving deals. This kind of is. So McCalt becomes a Senator, and Zdeno Chara, a young, big, strapping defenseman, young players traded out by Mike Milbury. And it's that rush to improve things. I look at the firing of Ron Hextall this year. And where I will agree with him, even though I know it cost him his job, and I know Flyer fans don't agree with him, is don't put guys in the NHL before they're ready. And don't give up on prospects, and don't rush any of this. It takes time. The Islanders, likely due to financial pressure, a lot of uncertainty with ownership. Even after Charles Wong took over, there was a lot of issues with the New York Islanders financially, and a lot of talk about whether or not they were long-term viable. The pressure on Milbury had to be strong, and yet you don't have to make this deal. Not only did they get McCalt and Chara, they get the number 1 draft pick from the New York Islanders. This is not a contending New York Islanders team. Oh no. It's a number 2 draft pick overall. And that draft pick becomes Jason fricking Spezza. If he'd kept Chara, never signs Yashin, drafts Spezza, doesn't trade Luongo, he probably wouldn't have been fired. Luongo would have been a goaltender for the Islanders till now, if he'd wanted to be. Spezza would have been a star for the New York Islanders. Chara still would have developed into what he is. Chara's so big and so determined, he still would have. This is 18 years ago, and he's still playing that game. But no, he trades for Yashin and gives him a 10-year, $87 million contract, which becomes an Islanders thing. They, of course, give DiPietro a 15-year contract years after this, and eventually they buy out Yashin. But Milbury's screw-up with that Yashin contract doesn't end here. But before we get to how it ends, let's talk about his drafting. 1996, at third overall, he drafts J.P. Dumont. He gets traded to Nashville. J.P. Dumont becomes a pretty solid forward, and he gets back a guy named Nabokov, who was not the Nabokov that played for San Jose. No, this Nabokov, he never played. Number 56, he drafts Zdeno Chara. Smart. He drafts him in the third round. Good move, but he traded him to Ottawa. 1997, at number 4 overall, he drafts Roberto Luongo. Smart move. Traded him to Florida. Number 5 overall, he drafts Eric Brewer. I don't have the trade of Brewer on here, but he lost it, and he went to Edmonton. So, again, Eric Brewer, good young defenseman, really could have helped with this defensive movement talked about in this magazine here, and he trades him. 1998, at number 9 overall, he drafts Mike Rupp. There wasn't a whole lot around Mike Rupp that I could bring up. Here's who he passed on. 1999, everybody knew this was a weak draft. This was the draft where Patrick Stefan goes number 1 overall. And if you do a redraft of the 99 draft, it's interesting because before you're done the first round, you're already into guys who are fringe NHLers. You're already into guys who really aren't first rounders in any other year. In a weak draft that it was known beforehand was a weak draft, Mike Milbury makes sure he has four number 1 draft picks. 4 first round picks to the New York Islanders in a draft that's weak. At number 5 overall, however, he drafts Tim Connolly. But before Tim Connolly develops, he trades him to Buffalo. Number 8 overall, he drafts Taylor Pyatt. Pyatt becomes an NHLer, not for the Islanders, Buffalo. So the 2 first rounders he had, and I mentioned Metsä, NHL career, not really a first rounder, and not a guy you give up Trevor Linden for. So in the weak draft, it just doesn't work out for them. In 2000, at number 1 overall, he drafts Rick DiPietro, which leads to the trading of Roberto Luongo. Those are 2 mistakes for the price of 1. Because going into that draft, the thought process was, okay, the Islanders have the defense, they have the goaltending, they should get some offense. There's some offensive guys in the 2000 draft who could, they drafted DiPietro. Oh, okay. Let me take a quick look here. In the 2000 entry draft, because again, I ran out of room on the board, right? So I had to be really careful. He passed on Danny Heatley, Marian Gaborik as the number 2 and number 3 picks. Danny Heatley. So really, he could have had Chara, he could have had Heatley, he could have had Spezza, he could have had the mid to late 2000s Ottawa Senators. Yeah, and instead, he didn't. He drafts DiPietro at number 5. He drafts Rafi Torres, who he then traded to Edmonton. That's an ongoing theme here. He drafts you, he trades you. In 2001, a very good draft that had Kovalchuk in it. He wanted nothing to do with it. Their first draft pick is at 101. So when it's a weak-ass draft, he gets 4 first-round picks. When it's a pretty darn solid draft, nothing. Nothing, because you got to trade those away. 2002, noteworthy is that at 87, he drafted Frans Nielsen. It's noteworthy. Again, I don't want to just bury the guy. I want to point out where he made a smart move in drafting Nielsen at 87. That's an astute move. 2003, do we all remember the meltdown? I remember the meltdown. I want to say it was Pierre Maguire. I want to say it was Pierre Maguire that had the meltdown. At number 15, the New York Islanders are proud to select Robert Nilsson. And the air goes out of the building. The 2003 draft, the strongest first round ever. You could point out, I believe it's 1979, but the 1979 draft would have been the first with 18-year-olds in it. So you have basically 2 draft classes for the price of 1. 2003 is a stacked draft. You can't walk away without anybody who's fantastic, and yet they did, and then Atlanta did with Alex Bourret, who never played a game in the NHL. 14, 15, and 16 from that draft, as I remember, weren't fantastic picks. But Nilsson, who did he pass on? Zach Parise, Ryan Getzlaf, Brent Burns, Ryan Kessler, Mike Richards, Corey Perry. The second round also contained Patrice Bergeron. That is just, at the time, it was seen as insane. So Mike Milbury is defending this draft pick right off the bat, and he's defending it. He is certain Nilsson's going to prove people wrong. He's going to be a good player in the NHL, and it never really happens. Worthy of note, at 58th overall, he drafts Jeremy Colleton, who is now the coach of the Chicago Blackhawks. So there's a little trivia answer for you. Who drafted Jeremy Colleton? Mike Milbury. 2004 at the number 16 pick, he drafts Petteri Nokalainen. 2005, he drafts Ryan O'Mara. That's his last draft. And in the 9 years he was there, 8 coaching changes. 8 coaching changes. In the last 9 years he was in charge of the Islanders. 8. And the most egregious was the last one that he did. His last firing was to replace Peter Laviolette with Steve Sterling. Yes, that Peter Laviolette was pushed aside for Steve Sterling. Now, again, to be fair, in his first year as coach of the New York Islanders, Steve Sterling did guide the New York Islanders to a playoff appearance. Then they fell off the map the following season. And he replaced Peter Laviolette, who, as far as I know, went on to have a pretty solid career as a coach. I'm thinking he's still a coach in the NHL. And the biggest, most egregious thing, after the salary cap comes in, so after we lose a year of hockey, the New York Islanders have to get under the cap. He does not buy out Yashin in order to get under the salary cap. He deals Mike Peca instead to get under the salary cap and keeps Alexei Yashin. Alexei Yashin, who at the time that he was fired had 15 goals in 42 games, who was known as a leader neither on nor off the ice, to quote the article from 2006 when he stepped down. And January 12th, 2006, he stepped down all right. He was fired. It did not come out that he was fired until Charles Wong was asked on a radio show about it. And Wong basically had to admit, yeah, he was fired. But what they did was they publicly allowed him to step down and accept a position as the senior vice president of Wong's sports holding company. He also owned an arena football league team. I've started realizing over my lifetime that senior vice president is Dwight Schrute. It doesn't seem like it means a whole lot in the corporate world. It's just senior vice president. Sounds all nice and fancy. It's used very often, it seems, as a position to, we got to get this guy out of here. Okay, you're senior vice president in charge of things. Go look at things over there. So he was finally pushed out in 2006 of a job that he had since 95. And it was absolute, complete, and total turmoil. They wanted to get under the cap and stay as low as possible on their salary, but Milbury wanted to win. Those things don't go together. And then when they finally opened up the coffers and, okay, we're going to spend money, they threw it all at Alexei Yashin, who didn't have the best work ethic, not the best team player. And that was the final. That to me, right here, this is where it's done. In 2001, even though he keeps the job till 2006, in part because the Islanders were just such a chaotic organization that where any other team would look and go, we need a new GM, Charles Wong, who had a big heart and he seemed very, very loyal, inherits this team and says, I'm going to work with Mike. I'm going to make this work. and he worked as long and as hard as he could. And then in the end, he says, I can't do this anymore. Wong has to get him out, but allows Mike to save face on his way out. So there you go. That's the GM career of Mike Milbury. Taking me 25 minutes. This is why I knew at the start I can't talk about his work as an analyst because this takes too damn long. So there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video, and yeah, it's quite the career. I didn't try to just pick on all the things like him trading away Tommy Salo, trading away Chris Osgood. He was very good at getting rid of goaltenders. Felix Potvin, and somehow, yeah, it's interesting. He did say after leaving the Islanders that he would be willing to work within an NHL organization again as a coach or GM kind of role. As far as I know, he's never been offered anything. There were rumors at one point that the Boston Bruins might have been looking at him for a replacement at coach, and even he said that's absolute BS. That's not happening. So I think his time running a bench or a team are done, but crazier things have happened in the sports world. There you go. Thank you guys so much for watching. I apologize that this took so long, but it's a lot to dig through over 11 years. I'll talk to you again soon.